Hi, my name is Lani Hernandez-David, and welcome to my house of horrors. This is where I make all my stuff for about a year now. Previously working out of my family's kitchen, but now I've got my own space where I spend almost all of my free time because I love to make stuff. I got my sculpting space is where I make pretty much a lot of these. Is where I made my fly. Some of you guys have seen sculpted right here, molded, painted, everything. I have my own desk space where I do my own music as well. And yeah, it's where I live. It's my second home, pretty much. So my name is Lani Hernandez-David, and I'm a mask artist guy from South London. I was born here, and I kind of got into it because I just love movies and stuff. I remember watching Spider-Man as I would say, when it first started, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I remember watching that as a child and just being like, I want to be Spider-Man. As I got a bit older, I started to get more into the movie, horror stuff. So Nightmare on Elm Street, RoboCop, The Fly, and I just really wanted to start making stuff. Mostly because I wanted to dress up. That's where it started. It wasn't like I want to make stuff for movies. It was just, I want to be the character. But when I was about 10 or 11, I made my first latex mask. And so I watched a YouTube tutorial, how to make a latex mask. And I think it was this Italian guy, Francesco Sanseverino, something like that. He had a video on how to make a Joker mask out of sculpting it, plastic, all of that. And so I begged my mum to buy me clay. It was like eyelash glue latex. It wasn't even real latex. My mum done my live cast with plaster bandage and that, and then I sculpted it out of wet clay. It completely failing, but I super glued it back together, and I done my eyelash glue latex and tissue cast, and I painted it with acrylics. It was kind of a hobby for a long time. Every now and then I'd make a mask. But then when I was 14, as what happens with many 14-year-olds is that they get into Slipknot. And so I got really, really into Slipknot. I was on the coach with my friend, and he knew I'd made masks, but he knew I didn't like metal. My older sibling was a massive metal fan of Avenged Sevenfold, and I thought, it's just screaming, it's terrible, it's not music. But he showed me Slipknot because he was like, I know you make masks, so you kind of dabble in that stuff, check out this band. And it was the Wait and Bleed music video with the puppets. And I thought that was so sick, so I got home and I just obsessed over Slipknot. Just every music video, everything I could find, all the different eras, the albums, all the masks, and I just got so obsessed with the music and the creativity and just the image. I started making replicas. And so when I would say I took it seriously from about 15, 16, I started really making masks. And when I kind of made the whole Lani Mask thing, was there's this YouTuber called The House of Masks, AJ Good, who is now my good friend. Shout out AJ. But he has this channel where he does unboxings of Slipknot replicas or Guar and stuff like that, music related. And he had this thing called Mailbox Mondays where you could send in a piece and he would unbox it. And I thought, yeah, that'd be a good way to kind of get my name out there a little bit. So I made Corey Taylor's Volume 3 mask, a replica. I remember sculpting it in my house and doing the polyurethane foam in my kitchen, which you shouldn't do because it's really cyanide and you will kill yourself. So don't do that. But 14-year-old me, 16. I didn't know that. So yeah, made it in my kitchen, sent it off to him. He unboxed it and he was like, oh, a 16-year-old made this, that's crazy. And then I gained a few followers from that video. And then people were like, oh, can I buy a replica of that? And I thought, oh, you can make money doing this? And so I literally just started making loads of Slipknot replicas. It's kind of how I made my money for a long time. Nothing crazy, but just enough to be able to buy more clay and plaster. All the money I earned was just going back into making masks. But of course I was still at school at this time. And then when I was 17, COVID happened. which feels like a lifetime ago. And so obviously lockdown, what am I gonna do in my spare time? Mask make. And so I was just making masks every day until about like 1 a.m. That is a good question.
Except Spider-Man.
Except, because I wanted to be the characters, I wanted to dress up and make my own costumes. And I just thought, I don't know, it'd be cool if one day eventually, because I started making loads of bits, just out of cardboard and EVA foam. You know, it'd be cool if I could incorporate that into just home videos and stuff like that, and, you know, think about the bigger picture. It's like, oh, actually, maybe if I just get good at it, maybe I could work in the industry one day. And especially since watching all the YouTube videos of people from the industry, so I thought, oh, I could do that. You know, I've got time to kind of get good at it. But I didn't go into it expecting like, oh, I'm gonna work for movies one day. But it has just always been a dream of mine since I was young. Just wanting to be a special effects artist, whether that's, you know, makeup or creatures or armor costumes. I just wanted to do it. I want to get paid to make my art. And so I really tried to find studios to get into. But some people didn't want to take me because I had no prior like classic training. Like I didn't go to school. So some people didn't want to take me. And then some places were really far. It's like a 2-hour travel. I was on Instagram one day and I came across this one studio I hadn't seen before called Robert Alsop and Associates. I was like, oh, I've not heard of this place. Let me check them out. And their postcode was very similar to mine, and I saw it was a 20-minute drive from my house. And I was like, what? So I called them up instantly, being like, hello, I'm a young artist, if you want to call it that. I make stuff. I saw you have a workshop pretty close to me. Would I be able to come for an interview or work experience or anything you have? But he said they didn't really have much work at that point, but still come have a look at the workshop. I've never been to an art studio like that before. So I went, he showed me around. It was really small, like low key. I thought it was quite cool because I went to visit a few other places that weren't hiring, but they were like massive units. It was a bit intimidating, but this workshop was nice and small. It was close by. I thought I was just visiting, but then he was like, okay, let's sit in my office and show me your portfolio. And I didn't bring it, I didn't know. So I just showed him my Instagram and he was like, oh, you do good work, but we don't have any work right now. So
let's pay you 10 bucks.
£10 an hour, you do really good work. £7 an hour. No, they weren't hiring, so I was like, okay, no worries, you know, I'll message you soon. And so a couple months later, I messaged him again saying, oh, hi, you know, I came to visit. Have you got work? And he said, yes, you start Monday. And I was like, oh, great. Yeah, so Robert Alsop he's been a costume maker for over 30 years. He does a lot of theatre stuff, movie stuff. Robert Alsop and Associates is very important because I work with a team of very talented, amazing artists. And they're all super talented and really nice to work with. And so since working in that studio, I've actually got to do stuff for film and theatre, like actually do stuff, you know, professionally. I get paid to make stuff now, which is great. And you learn from them. So I'm self-taught, but now since working in that studio, I wouldn't fully classify myself as 100% self-taught. To start off with, I was, but now because I work with people who have gone to university, or I work with one of the best sculptors in the UK, Brad. And he's shown me some of his techniques in sculpting. And so self-taught, but now I have that influence coming in from loads of professionals. My favorite project I've done, you know, through Lani Mask, I think is gonna have to be Sleep Token, because that was the first big commission I got. You know, I was selling a few Slipknot replicas here and there, but this was the first time an established band reached out to me saying, do you want to make stuff for us? And I thought, oh, you know, petrified. One of the members just hit me up on Instagram saying, hey bro, you want to make some masks for us? And you know, I saw the blue tick and I was like, oh, it's got to be like a scam account or something, but they were legit. And I was like, Sleep Token, I know that name. And I remembered I saw them at Bloodstock the year before. My friend Greg was like, oh, he loves Sleep Token. He's like, you've got to see this band at Bloodstock, you will love them. And I saw them and I thought, yeah, it was right, you know, it's fine. Wasn't really my style of music. And And, you know, they were big, they were still touring. They had like 200,000 monthly listeners, which is pretty good. But they were playing one of the smaller tents at Bloodstock. And then when they messaged me like a year later saying, do you want to make masks for us? I was like, oh, that's that one band I saw. And I saw that they had blown up in a year. They were like, you know, famous now. And I'm like, what happened? And I saw they released Take Me Back to Eden. And so, of course, I took the job on because, you know, it's a big job. You know, why not? It's my first time to really show what I can do. And when I started designing the masks and making it, I like to get into the zone and see, you know, get into the feel of the band. So I put on their music and I actually was pleasantly surprised. And once you give them a chance, I actually really enjoyed it. And that helped inspire me to kind of design some of their bits as well. There was a few ideas for all the masks because, of course, I just done the drummers, the bass player and the guitarist. I didn't do Vessels. That was done by another talented artist. For Twos, which is the drummer, there wasn't a design for his, but there was kind of inspirations. He knew he wanted a dread piece and he wanted, you know, kind of dark colors, a bit splotchy with the logo on the face and some gold here and there. And so I designed that. I'm not a great drawer, but I just done some sketches and we kind of talked back and forth. Literally, I done a sketch before we even talked about what he wanted. And I done a really like 2-second sketch. And then once we started talking, I started designing. It was actually quite close to what I had just made up in my head, which is quite funny. Like I had a hairpiece and everything. For Ivy, who's the guitarist, they had a design they sent me. And so they just said, you know, basically make that. And for the bass player, just do that sort of vibe as the guitarist, but maybe do something a bit different. So on his one, we just reverse the colors. So on the guitarist, you know, where it's black on his, it's gold on the bass player's one. There's a few hidden details in it as well. I just done, and I don't even think I told the guys. I just kind of done it, and they were really cool. Just kind of like, you know, do what you want. And you know, I was talking with them throughout the process. You know, if they didn't like something, they would just tell me and I'll change it. And you know, so these are just display copies that I made. I made them a few backup masks a little bit ago. So I thought, while I'm doing those ones, I'll make myself a couple display ones. So this is just a foam-filled bust, and these are just latex. But the actual masks were latex and foam, so they kept their shape really nicely. I designed this one. You know, they had a design for Ivy's, but for Freeze, I kind of done my own design a little bit. It's very similar, but just a bit changed. And then obviously Twos, I designed the neck piece. He said he wanted a neck piece, and so I kind of designed it with the filigree and the wrinkles and the gold cracks and stuff. I think the biggest challenge, maybe weight, but also just breathability. The issues they were having with the fabric masks was that, you know, it was covering their mouth and they would sweat, and then it would be like, you know, they can't breathe because the mask is wet, and the eyes were like riding up, so they couldn't see, you know, he couldn't see when he was drumming. We started off with a life cast, so I molded their face to sculpt the masks on, just so we knew the masks would fit perfectly. And then I sculpted all of them in monster clay, which is an oil-based clay, so it doesn't dry and you can melt it. It's a bit like wax. Then I just done the plaster mold, which is, you know, it's kind of like cement. And then latex, which is the main material I use. I use latex on everything. So Twos was just latex, and the other guys was latex and foam, just so it holds its shape really nicely. I think the hard part was just trying to make sure they can breathe. So I tried to put as many holes in the actual masks as I could. But it's still gonna suck. I mean, you know, you're still wearing a full mask for like an hour and a bit of a show. You're gonna sweat. But they seem to be doing pretty well. For the sculpting, I use a lot of my own homemade tools. Like, so one of my favorite tools is like a guitar string that's just been wrapped around and pressed into a pipe. These literally, I have loads of tools I've just collected over the years. A lot of them are just homemade bits. Like if I'm sculpting something and I'm like, oh, I really need a tool to do this one certain thing, I'll just make it, figure out a way to make the tool. But yeah, that's with the clay. And the plaster is literally, you just mix it with water and it thickens up as you use it. You put it on and you get like see if I can find half a mold. So this is one half of a plaster mold. This is for a Frankenstein thing I sculpted. And so this is the back of the head. And that's the plaster pretty much. And so what you do, it's a negative of the sculpt. So imagine this is clay, you have your sculpt, you want to make a mask, you put plaster over it. So you have a liquid and it starts to thicken up until it sets. And once that's set, you take it off and you now have a negative of that shape. And then you get your latex, which is kind of, I use Monster Maker's latex. It's kind of the consistency of like yogurt. And you can brush it in, put a few layers, and then you get a cast out. And so this is a mask that is straight out of the mold. That's unpainted latex rubber, all trimmed up. And then you paint it. I use acrylic mixed with latex. That's just the best way I've found. There's some people that use Pax paint, which is Prosade mixed with acrylic, but I just like latex and acrylic. It works for me. And then you strap it with leather, use rivets, and I'm making it sound easy. It's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. Once you get your head around the whole process, it is pretty. How does he breathe? Not very well. Not very well. On his real one, the kind of bit of the mouth was cut out, and I replaced it with mesh. And they have nose holes, so they can breathe a bit. But you kind of have to win some or lose some. It's like, do I look cool and can't breathe, or do I look a bit cool and breathe really well? So you kind of have to make a tough choice. But I mean, they've done a whole year of touring in it, so we all started off through just emails. And we had to do the live cast because that's kind of an essential thing. I made a couple masks for bands where I've not had their live cast, and I've just made it, and you send it off and they get the mask, and it's a bit too small, it's a bit too big, and there's only so much you can do with just measurements. And because this is so tight fitting, you kind of need a live cast to make sure it's going to fit them. So once we kind of arranged a date, they came, we done the live cast, and then they were just kind of like, do your thing, just make it. So I made it up, sent photos. I was literally making it till the very last second of the deadline the night before, until like 4 a.m. My mum was helping me cut the leather and stuff because I was rushing and trying to get it all together. And I got on a coach. I delivered the masks to their studio. We done a quick fitting. There's a couple things we needed to change, like adding holes in the ears on twos and stuff. But for the most part, it was all fine, fit great. And then I left them to it. And then the next time I saw them was at Wembley, which was a crazy night. They said, obviously, come to the show, we'll give you a good seat. And I think how it happened, we got there and Health Play, were pretty cool. And then I wasn't sure when they were going to debut the masks. I thought, are they just going to come out in the masks, or are they going to play half the set in their normal masks and then come out in the other one? I don't know. But before they came on, they just dropped it on Instagram. I started freaking out. I was like, oh shit, I wasn't ready for them to do that yet. I was seated pretty high up, and you could see, everyone. And like everyone just started getting their phones out, and they were all like, what's going on? And I was like, oh shit, people around me were looking at the masks going, I hate it. It was like a massive clash of people loving it and hating it, which at first, this is the first project I'd done. So at first you're a bit like, oh, that's a shame. But then you realize like people are going to like stuff, people are not going to like stuff. And you just kind of have to live with that. Like, that's fine. People are allowed their own opinions. But some of you were quite harsh, I will say. So a little bit about the design process. Static Dress, which is a band from Leeds. And recently Ollie, the singer, hit me up saying they want a new mask for one of the music videos they're doing. And it doesn't need to be tour worthy. It's just for this one video. I only had like a couple weeks to make it, less than that even. And so he hit me with a few images just of inspirations. And he kind of said, do a couple designs and send it back to me and we'll work something out. And so I just start with a really quick shit sketch, thick black outlines. And we kind of done a couple different ones. And I send that to him and I say, tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like, and I'll do another drawing. And then we kind of get to a final design, and then I just start sculpting it, start making it. And then even throughout that process, I'm talking with him as well, making sure if it's what they want. But Static Dress is a really, really fun band. I love working with them. So a little bit of the process I can show right now is the sculpting. And right now I'm making these Frankenstein hands for a project I'm doing, which I could speak about because it's literally nothing, but this is water-based clay on my hand cast. And you know, you want to sculpt details, you can put wrinkles in it, all of that. So this isn't done. I'd say the form and everything is pretty much there, but now I'm gonna go in and refine a lot of the detail with smaller tools and, you know, stuff like that. But I thought it might be quite good to show off a bit of the sculpting process. And, you know, once that's done, I'll make a 2-part plaster mold off of that, and then you'll cast your latex into that mold and you can paint it. And yeah, that's part of the process. Oh, favorite step when it's done, putting in the last rivet, and they're like, yeah, it's great. No, I really like the sculpting of it. Is fun. It can be frustrating at times, but I do love sculpting. I enjoy painting as well, though, you know, a lot of it. I enjoy plaster molding. That's really fun. Even if it's hard sometimes, it's fun trying to figure out how you're gonna do it. And a lot of the time things go wrong. Like I made some masks for Imperial Triumphant, who are a US-based band, and they came to me wanting some new masks, like resin masks, and I'm not really done that much of it. And so that whole process, which is none of their fault, it was all kind of me learning how to do it. A lot of things went wrong because I hadn't really used that materials, but eventually made masks that came out fine. But it's fun trying to learn, you know, something, you know, tried it one way, that didn't work. Okay, I'll try it this way. To be honest, like 50% of it is just experimenting. And like with Sleep Token, that's the first band I've made masks for a touring band. And so I'd be curious to know, I've not actually heard from them, but I'd be curious to know if there was something they would change on their mask, or like even just how it held up on the tour, because I don't know. There's like a clear coat on top of it. So I finish the paint job and I do a clear coat. And like in these guys' masks, on the real ones, these are just latex, but on the real ones, it was reinforced with like lycra fabric and stuff just to try and make it strong. But if I were to do them again, I already know, without hearing from them, I already know what I would change in it. Just more like integral things, making them stronger. I think the end goal is Slipknot. If I could get Slipknot, I'd be happy, even if it's just one guy. And yeah, and there's one guy, he knows, apparently he knows about me, I don't know. But there's one guy I want to make a mask for. It's not Corey Taylor, although I'd love to do Corey Taylor, of course. But Tortilla Man. I have a very cool design in mind. I want to make it. Let's make it happen. Whitechapel's up here. I literally just hung this up yesterday. So this is just a fiberglass copy of... this was probably about a year ago now as well. I started sculpting it. I originally started sculpting it out of monster clay, which is how I'd done the Sleep Token stuff. But something about it wasn't working, and sometimes it's better to just restart rather than trying to push clay and not really get anywhere. So I restarted it using water-based clay, which is my main clay I use. It's an air drying clay. So I sculpted it in a couple of days, done a silicone mold instead of a plaster one, because this wasn't going to be latex because it had to be quite durable and rigid. And I cast like resin and this kind of flexible resin material that kind of foams up a bit. So it had a little bit of give, but it was still quite rigid because it has these big antlers that come off it, and they needed to be removable for touring. So the mask itself had to be pretty strong. And so the antlers had bolts in it that I could feed it through the mask and bolt on the inside. But that was a really fun project. I really enjoyed doing Whitechapel. They're from the US, so like I was saying, usually you want a live cast. And I was thinking what we could do, because I can't fly to the US, so that, you know, they're not gonna fly here. So I got them to do a 3D scan of Phil's face. So you can get like a phone app on your phone and you can do a really like shit scan, but that's enough to sculpt something on. So I got a scan of Phil's face and then I 3D printed it at my house. But for the most part, because I was following a design they had made, I just copied it as much as I could, one-to-one. And I was doing Imperial Triumphant at the same time, so I was really busy, and I was still working at Rob's like 9 to 5, so it was just like all the free time I had was doing those two projects. I was doing Whitechapel right until the last second I could, because they were filming a music video in like a week or something, so I sent it, and then the parcel got lost. They literally got the mask, I think it was on the day of shooting, or the night before shooting, but the whole time we were like, oh fuck, you know, we couldn't really do fittings or anything. But because it was, Phil wasn't gonna wear it and sing with that, you know, with it on throughout the whole show. It was just for the music video, and then they bring it out on show, and he wears it for a little bit and then takes it off. So it didn't have to be like perfect, you know, comfortable. And they're so nice. Whitechapel, all of those guys are so friendly, and they're gonna be playing Download soon, and so I'm gonna try meet up with them. Okay. Oh. The personal favorite mask I've made, which is still a replica. Green Goblin, because, you know, that's where it started, but I think for me, it has to be the Fly. Just because I remember watching this. I remember watching it when I was like 13 and just like loving it, just being freaked out by it. It's disgusting, you know. And I always wanted a replica, but I couldn't buy one. And so, you know, when I got older, I was like, I'll just make one. So I sculpted this here, and he's got, you know, his silicone gooey bits and stuff like that. And he's got, you know, his hair, and I love that movie. So I just always wanted to make one. So I'm really happy that I got to make that. And I got to meet Jeff Goldblum a couple weeks ago, and I brought this with me, and I was like, look, do you remember this? And he was like, oh my god. And this was a bit more tricky because it's so big and it has all these, you know, bits coming off it. So the same thing as I sculpted it with water-based clay, and then I made a plaster mold. But usually if you do a full head mask like this, you want to do a 2-part plaster mold because you've sculpted on a life cast. So you can't just do one big mold because you won't be able to get the life cast out. So you have to do it in 2 parts. But because this is so big, I had to do a 3-part mold. So it was like split down here, and it was also split like along here. It was the most complex mold I've made out of plaster. That's my favorite thing I've made out of just free will. This is the first puppet I've ever made, and that's from a movie called Return of the Living Dead, the Tar Man zombie, and I've just always loved that design. So originally that was a mask, but then I got a foam latex copy made, and so I made him into a puppet. So this is literally just made from bicycle brake cables. Is how they used to do it back in the day. There's like a fiberglass underskull with hinges of the eyebrows and all of that. And so it literally just moves the underskull, and the foam latex is on top. If I could choose something to make forever, it would probably be like creature puppets. It honestly depends on the piece. You know, some of them are really quick. This I didn't sculpt. This was a 3D file from Instagram. You just buy the file. So it's a 3D print that I just resined over. And, you know, that took a few hours to make. The paint is super simple. A good example, this is a latex mask. And this is something I sculpted when I was in the US for part of this festival called Pale Fest, which is run by AJ Good, the House of Masks. But this year I went, which was the second year, they said, do you want to do a sculpting demo? And so I sculpted this in like a day and a bit, and then I made a plaster mold while I was there, and we got a foam out. Yeah, so that's pretty quick. And the paint, I'd done a batch of 10, and so I painted them all in one go. And it took about a day and a bit. So it honestly depends on the detail, if there's a design. But with this, I kind of had free will, so I was just making up. So it didn't take too long. And it's just loads of mask makers, costume makers. It's like really Halloween vibes. And we don't really have that here in the UK or London specifically. It's just not really a big thing. But in the US, Halloween is so big. And so they put on this festival, Pale Fest, every year. And it's just a great time. It's one of the best festivals I've seen online. 2023, I brought my full odorous costume from Goa in 2 massive suitcases by myself on the plane. 2 massive suitcases filled with this costume, and I dressed up while I was there, which is actually this guy right here. That's the mask and the hands I wore when I went to the US. But there's like shoulder pads and massive legs and everything, just because I love Goa. Goa's great. Most of my collection is just bits I've made are just around, but at my house I have a few bits that I do collect. So those hands I made up there is a replica of these, which are real odorous hands. That it was a backup copy for the late 90s, early 2000s, made at the Slave Pit, which is their workshop in Richmond, Virginia, the US. And it's just latex, and you can see the cheesecloth. I love Slipknot. Slipknot's where it started for me, but Goa is still one of my biggest inspirations because they make all their stuff. Well, my favorite mask, I want to say Odorous from Guar, but they don't wear masks. They are actually aliens. That wouldn't count. Probably have to be Corey Taylor's Iowa mask with the dreads, because I loved that era. When I got into Slipknot, it was like Iowa all the way, and I've remade that mask so many times. Like there's a lot of hidden kind of details that you'd miss usually, and they were made by this Japanese artist, Screaming Mad George. Yeah, the white one with the kind of green dreads and the black eyes and the stitching and all of that. There's like a nipple on the back as well. Not many people know about. There's like a nipple stitched into the mask.
We didn't talk about President, but
Yeah.
maybe you could say something, or
President is a cool one because they're new and they just messaged me saying, "Can you make some bits for a music video?" What can I? That's all I can say. It was fun. It was fun. I got to be there on set while they were filming it because I had to do a quick fitting and stuff. So I kind of got to watch them film some things. It was in this really cool building. I've had a few people reach out, but I've just been like, I'm too busy. So I'm kind of taking this time right now to work on some of my own passion projects. It's tricky because they're very different. Even if you're making the same piece for a touring band, you do have to think, well, you know, this has to last. You know, coming in and out of a box every day and being worn for a couple of hours and it's covered in sweat and stuff. Whereas for a movie, depending on what it is, it only needs to be used a couple times. I've worked on a couple short movies or music videos where, you know, they're only going to do 1 day of filming in it. So it can be a bit rough and a bit, you know, slapped together. I think I prefer that stuff, the quick stuff. I think, like, you know, I'll take on any work I can get. But my heart is in the kind of messy stuff. But then again, Guar, like, they make their stuff to last, but it is also quite cartoony and crude, and that's what I love. The early Guar, I started taking this a bit more seriously when I was younger, to be able to work for myself eventually, have my own business, my own name, and I'm getting there slowly, and, you know, people have been a massive help, like all the people who share my work or the followers. I'm very grateful, because I wouldn't even have the studio right now if it wasn't for that. Or Sleep Token, all these bands that reached out to me. So the future is just to try do it more. So these are just a couple casts of plain stuff. So this is Nosferatu, that's, you know, straight out the mold, unpainted. This is a good one actually. This is a Venom mask I made when I was about 12. You know, this is an unfinished cast of 2. You know, this seam hasn't been trimmed yet. It's unpainted. You can see where the mesh would be. So I'm in a band as well called Solatia, and I'm trying to push a bit more of the artistic side to it a bit more. So all on this top shelf and over here is puppets we made for one of our music videos for Dirty Rain, and we filmed it like right on this desk here. We made a whole set. It's gonna be used like that light to light the shot. And we spent about 2 weeks in here doing the stop motion, you know, moving the puppet, taking pictures. With the band, it is fun to try and incorporate a bit of my artistic side into it a bit. I started wearing a mask in it just because it's fun. When I was definitely too young, but I would say the right age, was A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I loved those movies, and so I wanted to make Freddy Krueger's glove. And so I was 12 years old, and I cut it out of copper and everything. And this is when I started year 7 here, so secondary school. And there was this guy in the design technology room, this technician called Mr. Thompson. And people always used to go to him if they needed a bit of help on their project, you know, a school project. But when I was 12, I went to him and I said, "Can you help me construct this Freddy Krueger glove with knives, like at school?" And he was like, "Absolutely." Robin is his first name. Now we're good friends. I've known him since I was 12. He has a studio near me. He does ceramics and loads of cool sculptures and stuff. And so he helped me make this when I was about 12, which is really fun. And we're still in contact, and I always see him. He always sees me. He's a bit of an older gentleman. I was about 16 when I really got into Slipknot, and I didn't have a studio. He has a studio a few minutes from my house. And so he cleared me a little space on his desk that I could come in during my lunch breaks and after school, come do a bit of sculpting, and we would just work together. I would say, you know, I'm self-taught, but he helped me quite a lot because, you know, he didn't necessarily do sculpting like this. He'd done more pottery, but I definitely learned a lot through him as well. So I owe a lot to Robin.
Thank you very much to the Backstage Explorers for exploring my dungeon with me today. I don't know where this Lani guy went, but if I see him, I'll suck his blood and strangle him to death. But thank you very much, and maybe we'll see you again very soon.